Hello and welcome to another episode of Building Minnesota RØKKR. I am Ashley, aka Midnite, Director of Content for the team. We got Brett Diamond, COO, in the building. Say hey. Say what's up.
Hey.
Hey, what's up? And then we got Charlie in the building today, as he is every day because he works here. This episode's kind of bringing us back to the roots of the podcast, which is Building Minnesota RØKKR. We initially came on talking about building our roster, building the brand, building the staff around this thing. And now that is you. You are officially the production coordinator. I knew I was going to mess it up. Fine. I should know. Production project was, I look at those as the same thing.
Way to have your finger on the pulse of your staff.
Yeah, right.
That's fine.
I know exactly what you do here, Charlie. Trust me.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah.
What is it you would say you do here?
Exactly? How much time you got?
Exactly. Charlie's always kind of running around, as we all are, just running around, getting stuff done. I think you we'll talk about your first day, but you are the production coordinator, so he helps organize a lot of the shoots. He knows who's available to shoot what, the equipment that we use to do these things. And then also, I don't know how to title this, so I'm just going to call you the Saga guy. You are the executive producer, director, videographer, all of it for our series Saga, which is, if you guys haven't watched, it's a docuseries that we put up on our YouTube channel. You should definitely check it out because Charlie and the whole team, I mean, it's not just Charlie doing it. We have team here like Peppa, Ellie, Trevor, everyone here is putting their best foot forward on the project. I always hate naming people who work on projects because I'm like, I think Dane does stuff for it too. And like, there's a bunch of people that are all doing stuff for it.
And I can definitely talk more about like kind of who does what and all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the coolest thing about Saga to me is that it's like, it is a full team project. Like everybody's working on it. And I think you can tell in the end product that it's like, it's, you know, a lot of people really care about it and put a lot of effort into it.
Yeah, that's for sure. Wanted to kind of tell your story, not only your first day, but of how you got hired.
Yeah.
So tell me kind of like, why did you reach out to us? Why was your interest piqued when you saw or heard about the team? Like, what was kind of your reaction to hearing about the team and then obviously sending a message?
Yeah, so I don't know how deep you want to get into this, but I'll take.
Bro, it's a podcast. That's
all the way.
That is why we're here.
So if we take like a big step back, you know, I've always been, you know, a big fan of esports and you know, gaming in general. That's always been a huge part of my life. And when I, you know, initially graduated from college at the University of Minnesota, you know, I was really hoping to get a job working, you know, combining my passions of video production and esports. And I was lucky enough to land a job with Riot Games in California. Worked on the LCS out there for a couple years. And so, you know, that was something that I loved. I was able to work in esports and kind of follow my dream that way. But, you know, always had that itch to move back to Minnesota, as you know, better than most people do.
Yeah. The day I left, I wanted to come back.
Oh yeah, Minnesota's pretty great.
So you were based in California.
Yep.
Traveling around to different events?
No, so it was pretty much everything was based out of Los Angeles, and you know, I'd lived in Minnesota my entire life, and so I was very much a fish out of water. It was weird, you know, being able to wear shorts in December and things like that. But you know, I did miss Minnesota. So you know, I moved back here, continued to work in video production and sports, and you know, worked for Big Ten Network for a little while. Worked for the Humane Society here for a little while, but I always had that itch that, you know, I wanted to get back into esports because that's, you know, what I'm really passionate about, but I never thought that it would happen in Minnesota. You know, it was just something that's like, you know, I'd have to move if I ever wanted to get back into that again. You know, come last summer, I see that article that the Wilfs were investing in an esports franchise, and immediately I just start like researching, Googling, like finding out as much as I possibly can. And the only thing I keep seeing is just like that first article. But I was just like constantly had my feelers out that I'm just like, if I can make this work, like I want this to happen. And so, you know, I kind of kept eyes out on like, you know, the people who were hired. I saw you got brought on. I saw, you know, Annie got brought on, and did my best to kind of find like, was it Twitter DMs? Was it LinkedIn? You know, how can I get in contact with these people? Because it's like, I have esports experience. Like, I want to work for you guys.
Did you DM us early on?
I didn't. So I've never been a big like DMer.
Yeah.
I think I've sent probably like 5 DMs in my entire life. And most of them are work related. Yeah. So, you know, I went on LinkedIn and like I found you two and like I was like, oh, do I like add you? Is that weird? And eventually, you know, I attempted to add you, and Annie, who Annie is our VP of Marketing and Creative.
Yes, shout out to Annie.
Shout out to Annie.
Podcast listeners know Annie.
Yeah, she's been on a couple times.
Yeah, so I sent a message to both you and Annie because I saw you guys were on the creative and content side, and just said
I ignored you.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
It's fine.
I have so many messages. It's too much. I wish I was better at like knowing how to like because there's value there.
Yeah,
obviously. Like we brought him on. There's value there, right? So
yeah.
I need to be better at like reading through them and like kind of deciphering them. But I think I love that interest. Not that I don't like, I wish people weren't interested in this thing I love. Like, it's not that. It's just I don't have the bandwidth to, like, literally go through all of them.
Oh, yeah.
At least right now.
How many messages did you send before you got a response?
I sent one to each Ashley and Annie because I didn't want to be.
So I didn't blow you off is the takeaway?
I don't think so. Okay. I was to be fair, I think I was a little scared of you at first.
What?
Like, well, I didn't know, like, if you were, like, this big boss man who was, like, intimidating. I mean, now
what do you think now?
Actually,
what do you think now?
I'm very scared.
That was my first thought too about Brett, and because I think like when I first ran into you, obviously we had a conversation that I'm sure like you were looking me up and I was looking you up, and I was like, dang, he has like a very legitimate like history with everything that he's done, and he's like in charge of this whole thing, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, if this guy sucks, this is gonna suck.
It's like a really weird like business dating app thing where like you like look at like their interests and background. It's like, oh, a wonderful fit. Like it's great.
But I mean, upon meeting, it was obviously like he's super like really intelligent, to the point, good conversation, and down to earth. Yeah, which is like I vibe with that.
So what's funny, and I think we should be upfront with the listeners about this because they'll feel the vibe with some of these questions. Charlie is probably the person that I spent the least amount of time with hiring.
Yeah.
In part because before you came in for that interview, Annie said, we found the person. This is 100% the guy.
She was excited.
So exactly.
So should we take a step back to like that point?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, yeah. So like I said, I sent these messages out, and it was very much just like a cover letter, I think, for like a job application that didn't exist.
Exactly.
And was just like, hey, here's my background. Here are some examples of all of my work. Here's a list of references of like anybody you want to talk to.
That's the right way to do it.
And I just kind of sent it, didn't want to be pushy, and then I didn't hear anything for a long time.
Was it like 3 months? Do you want to put a time like 3 months or
something like that? 2 or 3 months. And eventually I get like the email notification that's like, oh, you have a LinkedIn message, and this is months later. So I initially assumed it's some kind of like spam or something.
Like
I had, because I've never gotten like a LinkedIn message notification before.
I envy you.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, it's changed now. But,
you will.
Yeah, but I got this email back from Annie, and it was essentially, like Brett said, that just like we were looking for somebody with video experience and esports experience to kind of be in this coordinator role. Are you free like tomorrow to come into WeWork? And it was something that it just kind of moved really fast, and that's I think where Brett can kind of step in.
Yeah. So I remember vividly because we had talked a lot about we felt like this was a role that we needed, and then I believe I was driving from one meeting to another or something, and Annie called me super excited, as we all know
because you talked to her on the
the
phone before you got brought in, right?
Yeah, and so in that first message, it was initially like, "Are you free for a phone call this afternoon?" And I thought it was going to be like 15 minutes, whatever. And I think Annie and I talked for like 2 hours on the phone.
No, well, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, and we like it just like didn't stop. So that was where it was kind of like,
that's
like,
amazing.
This is a cool fit.
Shout out to Annie.
Oh yeah.
Yep. So she calls super pumped up. We're going to have him come in tomorrow or next week, whenever it was. And then I was supposed to be in your interview, but I got stuck on a call. I think it was a call with Activision about something time sensitive.
I remember it was like,
I remember like I was texting you and Annie, and Annie was like, this is the person we're going to hire. And I was like, look, it was very clear that they were ready to hire. I was like, all right, I'm going to stop by for 5 minutes because the Vikings were playing that night, a Thursday night game.
Oh
yeah.
Yeah, it was the Thursday night game, and I had to get to the stadium. your vibe was good, and I knew they wanted to hire you. I was like, all right, good. And I texted Daniel. I was like, yep, great. Did we offer you the job in the room?
No. So what was funny was I went into that and like it was never called like an interview at any point. It was like, hey, do you want to come?
Neither were mine, to be fair.
Yeah, it was like, do you want to come and like,
let's talk.
do you want to come and like meet us? And then like it was very much like super upfront. Like I had obviously not met Ashley, but then I think we got into that conversation and like Annie like kind of introduced us, and then we just kind of started like bouncing off each other because of our like somewhat similar backgrounds of like moving away, coming back, not thinking we'd ever get into esports in Minnesota, and then it was just kind of like
exactly.
Well, and what's funny about it for me is our minimal interaction was very, very rare compared to how much time I spent with all of our early hires. Like I spent a ton of time with most people that we brought on. It was just the timing of it and the fact that it was like, all right, we need this position, and Annie and Ashley say yes, so let's do it. We don't need to go make them come back and spend an hour with me just for and giggles.
Yeah. What's funny is the position that you filled was exactly what we needed. Like what you're good at is exactly what we needed. Like, because I can tell us like what we need to do and generally kind of how we need to do it, but I don't know like the lights to get or the camera or who should be assigned to that, and like so that kind of like really filled
How
a
do we
gap.
upgrade the hostage vibe of our early podcasts?
Exactly, because we definitely did have a hostage vibe, and so and also at that time I had told Annie and Brett about wanting to do a docuseries. And it's pretty clear now, like if we hadn't gone and done one, we would have been one of the only, especially with how much content we do, it would just be insane if we didn't do one, right? So I was like, I really want to do this. I think we'd spoken with somebody that we'd worked with in the past. It wasn't going to work out just based on like what he had to do. And so I was kind of like, dang, like I don't know who fills this role. Yeah. And so then when Annie, I can't remember if was I on the call where she called us, or maybe like she briefed me before the interview a little bit and said like, hey, this is Charlie, here's his everything, and this is like what he's done, and this is what he could be good for. Oh, P.S., when I was talking to him, I asked him kind of like what would he kind of be interested in doing, and you had mentioned like wanting to like do a docuseries or do that type of work. Yeah. Why did you say that? I mean, obviously it's true you want to do it, but like what got you interested in that type of thing or wanting to do that for us? Yeah,
so it's kind of two things. I mentioned I worked in League of Legends, and from my background as a fan there, I was a big fan, watching things like TSM Legends or Cloud9's documentary series or Team Liquid's, right. And I know how powerful that could be, just being able to make those personal connections that you talk about all the time, right? Like peeling back the layers and getting to see the background of the team. Yeah. And when I worked for Big Ten Network, I got to do some work and some behind the scenes and see how they do their show called The Journey, following college athletes around the Big Ten. And to me, that's my favorite kind of thing to work on is storytelling and telling these background stories and doing these kind of deep dives. And it's something I've always been really, really passionate about. And
that's crazy, bro. Because we needed that. Like it was in my head. It was literally the day before too that I'd got like kind of like found out like, okay, we're gonna have to go a different way than I initially thought on this. Yeah. And I was like, I mean, obviously there's a lot of people out there that are getting more into esports, hopefully they'd be local to Minnesota, but you were like right in our backyard. You literally live in Eagan, which is, where we are now. And so we just thought like, I was immediately like, okay, cool. Like, I hope it was kind of like, and I think of, and maybe I can't tell if this is a good or a bad thing that I think like this, but I was like, man, this is awesome. I hope he isn't like a psycho or something. like something bad is gonna like I'm anticipating.
We have high standards here at Minnesota RØKKR.
No psychos. No psychos. This could be a weird recall moment if I ever go psycho. Yeah, I'm just kidding. Yeah, fine. But so obviously I was excited about the interview. There's two things I remember from your interview is you were really excited, and I could tell that like you were smiling the whole time, and not in that weird like please like me smile, but in the like I'm very genuinely excited type of smile. And that was what like really stood out to me, because I was like, this dude actually like is passionate about this and wants to like go all the way in, right? And that's like what we'd be looking for that person who's gonna like tell like the story of Saga and everything. And so that was what really excited me. And then obviously your traditional experience in kind of the production world, that was super helpful at the time as well.
And you have this unique combination of experience in esports, in traditional sports, in storytelling with the Humane Society. I mean, those are 3 things that there probably aren't a lot of people that have checked all 3 of those boxes, particularly somebody relatively early in their career. And we've talked a lot about on this podcast, and obviously internally with the staff, of how our goal has been to bring together people from different perspectives from each of those worlds. And what was really appealing, at least to me, when Annie showed me your resume, was the fact that you had a legitimate production experience in all 3 of the worlds that we're trying to find the right balance of striking, and that's unique.
Yeah, and I think that was just like, like we've mentioned this so many times, it was like this was such a perfect fit, because it was like, I remember being, nervous. Nobody ever likes leaving a job, right? But I remember, going into my supervisor's office at the Humane Society being really nervous and all that, and then the second I explained this job, they were like, oh, like, did they write that for you? Like, it was like, they were pumped for me. Cause it's like, this is like, if I had to like write up a dream position for me, like it was this. And like,
same, bro. Is that crazy?
And it's, like,
we're so lucky.
Yeah. And I don't know how much of this is just going to turn into like how much, like, I love this team and everything, but it's just like
that's right. Our first few podcasts were all like everybody running towards each other in slow motion.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's like the vibe
each other
here,
up.
right? Like it's funny. Cause like, you mentioned, like being able to coordinate and like set up lighting and stuff. But I think what's so cool about this team is it's like everybody from every level like has input, and like I'm learning things from everybody on this team. You mentioned, I know you don't like calling out individual people, but like Trevor, Ellie, Peppa, Dane, like all of these people on the content team, like they come in with these suggestions and these things that like I can continue to learn from. And it's so cool because you get that from everybody and all these different unique backgrounds. And it's like, we're all bringing a lot to the table, but we're all also taking a lot away. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the really fun things about this, I think, for everyone. But for me personally, there is no right answer to what we're trying to do.
Right.
Every organization is trying to find the right balance of many different factors, and there's no template, there's no playbook, and we've laid the foundation of something we believe in, hired some really good people, and so far we've produced some pretty cool stuff, but we want to keep doing that. And you mentioned learning from everyone. I mean, even for me in my role, I'm learning from every single person on this team every day. Yeah. Right. And that's true regardless of what your title is.
Same. Yeah. It's really a true like collaborative spirit. I mean, obviously we all have, we all keep in tune with each other and what we feel this brand is. And we always kind of have that compass pointing north. That's right, Toronto. I'm sorry. But we all have like this direction we know that we're going, and how we get there is through all the collaboration that we do. And that's not even just true in the content, but in everything, right? Yeah. And I think that's one of my favorite, and I think that's why like we feel so jazzed all the time about the team. I'm wondering if like the podcast listeners are like, God, we get it. You quit patting yourself on the back. But like, we're just really a passionate group of people, and we're passionate about what we're doing every day. And I think that's one of the special things about it. So talking about like, how you started, obviously that's like how you got on our radar, got hired. Like you said, dream position. I definitely like relate to that a lot. But when you started on your first day, what were you thinking it was going to be? I don't even know if me or Annie primed you properly for that day.
A little bit.
What was your kind of like thinking like, well, what's today going to be? Because we basically, for those of you listening, Charlie's first day was us. We'd use the space at VEN because we'd go over there and shoot some of our very early content was shot over there. Thank you, VEN, for letting us in the space. But yeah, we would go over there and kind of like shoot interviews. We had the players in town. I think they were there to do like some big content shoot. Were they there to meet Gary? Or was that a different time?
No, I think that was why they were there.
It was
that week.
It was that week.
It was that week, yeah. They weren't meeting Gary that day, but they were basically there that week to shoot content, meet Gary, and like all meet as a team for the first time. And, so day one, like I had a shot list and a series list, and I had interview questions, and I had the whole deal, and we shot I don't even know how many videos that day. And you just came into the building. And what I love about every single person that we've brought on is they've just, rolled up their sleeves and got into it, no matter what it was. But what was like your expectation versus what happened, and how was your first day?
So it was, I remember because I was like so excited, and I'm like, okay, like where am I even going my first day? Like I didn't even know. And like I didn't know at that point for sure. Like, is it like, am I going to WeWork? Like what's happening? And then I think like 2 days before, Annie like texted me or something and was like, hey, we have a video shoot on your first day. Like, do you want to come and like bring a camera? And so like that's pretty much all the information I got. It was like, go to the Vikings HQ and do that. And like I remember I was like super nervous. So like I got here, really early.
You were like waiting, and I felt bad.
Well, and it was like I got here, like there wasn't even like the security guard at the gate yet, and I like started like panicking, and I was like, oh God, how do I even get in?
I'm gonna be late.
I know.
But you were like literally the first person here.
And I called Annie, and like Annie was like in Minneapolis, and she's probably thinks I'm like this weirdo. I'm like, where's the security guard gate? She's like, I have no idea. But yeah, like eventually I get let in and everything, and it's we go into this room, and you mentioned we have all this equipment and stuff we're bringing in, and you essentially like hand me this sheet of paper, and it's like, okay, I'm going to be bouncing back and forth between rooms. Here are all the players you're asking the questions. Okay, have fun, bye. Not really bye, but it was, but you were bouncing like, back and forth.
Yeah, I was back and forth making sure, because we basically had 2 rooms simultaneously recording everything we need to record, and I think that was the play, because I don't know that we would have got all that done having to set up in between every duel. We were basically working twice as fast.
It's a good summary of our onboarding process, which is, okay, you're here, go do something that you know how to do, and then we'll figure the rest out later.
Yeah. I think everyone has like a famous first day, it seems like Ellie behind the camera, which eventually we were talking about, like we should have Ellie on the podcast, so that would be pretty fun. Like I think the idea is to like get everybody who works here on the podcast and really kind of...
Ellie can come on to narrate the outtakes, the amazing outtakes video that at some point she'll drop. When one of us takes her off.
Like when you forgot to press record.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that.
Yeah,
there's others.
That's a tough gif right there. But yeah, there's some outtakes that we have just from all the shoots we do, and Ellie's pretty good at picking out those moments. But yeah, her first day, I think there was some catastrophe happening.
It was the day that all of the team names
they leaked
because they were found in the CDL website code, right? That was it, right?
Yeah. Oh, God. And so she hears me like on the phone. I'm like, what the hell? Like, how the heck? Like all this stuff. And she's like, who's this psychopath I'm gonna have to work with? And then, I mean, like everyone's just got right into it on their first day. And I think that's been one of my favorite parts. And that just speaks, I mean, it's just kind of a startup vibe. Like everyone just does what needs to be done because it needs to be done. But now, like, even the team, I think, has grown a lot since you've come on board. And so what's that kind of been like for you, noticing this evolution of like, okay, I get here and it's kind of scrappy, and now it's like we're here in the HQ. It's ridiculous. It's awesome, and everyone has a purpose.
It's been really cool, especially because, you mentioned we were all just kind of like, okay, we have this huge list of things we need to get done. Like, how are we going to get this all done? Especially we hosted launch weekend.
That
which
was a big
beast.
thing. That, I mean,
and that was
launching a brand, getting a team, staffing up, and being the team that has to launch the league was incredible experience, but just insane, just pure insanity it was around here.
Oh yeah, and it was, so much of this was just like everybody does everything to make sure we put on this event and that it's as successful as it can possibly be. And we pulled it off. Somehow we pulled it all off, and it was this incredible, launch experience. But leading up to that, it was just so much like, we just have to get things done. Like, let's do it any way possible. But now it's been cool to be able to take a little bit of a step back and be like, okay, what are our processes for making sure that all of this stuff gets done in a timely manner. We stay as efficient as we can and make sure we're efficient and organized and, are operating at full capacity. And that's something that's been, really, really fun to kind of develop and continue to grow in. And, we brought in a few new people, and kind of figuring out where they all fit in has been great. And we're becoming this like kind of well-oiled content machine, which is really cool.
We're getting to where we want to be.
One of the things that I love most about this team is even the Sunday night at the end of launch weekend, people were already talking about, what we can do better, what we can do next time. As amazingly successful as that weekend was, everybody's mindset was very quickly to, okay, how do we continue to raise the bar? And to your point earlier, Ashley, there were several teams that we talked to that weekend that said that they had no interest in hosting the first event because it would be, they knew it would be a lot of work. And hats off to everybody on the team, the amount of effort that went into it. I was in the NFL events department for 11 years, worked Super Bowls, worked other major events. The effort that every individual on our team had to put in to get us to where we were able to deliver that event at a high level was every bit the amount of work and time and dedication that goes into Super Bowls and Olympics and World Cups and any major event that you can think of. We had a smaller team executing it than you have on some of those things. So the total scale is different, but the individual effort was absolutely on par with that.
Yeah, I think that's just why you guys hear us so frequently proud on the podcast and in our content. We're super stoked with what we're doing. And I'm just really proud of the content team that we've put together so far. I think, I'm excited to bring on more people because we need more people. We need content delivered all day, every day. Yep. So that's going to be another interesting thing as we kind of launch weekend into 2020.
Oh yeah.
So stoked.
Nice.
What's something that you feel like has benefited us the most as far as content and how that process has gone? If someone's listening and they're like, how do I get into esports, or I want to make cool videos, what do you think is something that somebody could apply to their life, or even what do you see has been beneficial?
So, I think a big thing that has really gone into, making sure that our content is as successful as possible, or if somebody wants to, come in and figure out what kind of value that they can bring to the team is, so many people who watch our content and who are listening to this podcast, are passionate about esports. They watched Vision from Optic for a long time, or, they watched all of these pieces of content that have been highly successful. And I think that the people here who have brought a lot is the people who watch those and can kind of take a step back and be like, okay, why is that successful? Why am I enjoying watching this? What are they doing well? And being able to kind of look at things from more of an analytical side of things. And, from Brett's point earlier about bringing in people from so many different backgrounds, they come in and everybody has their suggestions from what they've done that can really elevate whatever it is we're working on, even the things we're already doing that we think we're doing well. Even things as far as, lighting the interview of a podcast, or, something that I thought that I, was really, really good at. Trevor can come in, or, somebody from the team can come in and be like, hey, what if we did it this way? Or I saw this example here, what if we shift it, and what if this looks better? And I think all of us here are open enough to those suggestions and are willing to bring those to the table that, every one of those suggestions and every one of those reasons can come up and continue to elevate that content.
Yeah, exactly. I think I agree with everything you just said. Cosign.
I think for people who want to work here, want to work anywhere, right? And your story is a good example because you had sent a LinkedIn message, you waited a while to hear back. Sometimes it's just a little bit luck of the draw if any one of us happen to be responding to LinkedIn messages or Twitter DMs at that particular time. I think everybody that works here tries to respond to as many of those messages as possible. None of us can get to the sheer quantity of those messages that are coming in, but trying to get to as many as possible. It's a little bit just serendipity, right?
Do the right thing at the right time.
Somebody happened to be responding. But persistence matters, and keep sending those messages. We have other people on the team that we've hired because they were persistent, and we had conversations with them. But you also have to have the experience and the talent.
Yeah.
We do hear from a lot of people that want to work here, but they don't have the skills that frankly we need. And even timing is everything, right? If somebody that had all of the skills we might need for the production coordinator role contacted us today, we no longer need to fill that role. So it's just different. But at the same time, for people that are reaching out, be honest about what your strengths are, because, one of the things, at least for me, if I'm looking at somebody's resume or talking to somebody, if I start to smell BS, and that they've exaggerated their resume, that's very quickly that person will get put in a very specific bucket that is hard to climb out of.
The trash. Sorry.
Yeah. And at the same time, people don't know what you can read a job description, you can look at these things, but you don't know what the person is truly looking for.
Yeah.
Right.
When Annie saw your background, you clearly checked a number of things on her list that never could have been communicated in a job description, or even if somebody had asked a lot of questions about the role. So, to a lot of people, it's just be honest about what your strengths and your weaknesses are, particularly your strength. This is what I'm good at. This is what I've done. If you've produced content or we've talked to some people who we've zeroed in on because they have their own podcast or they're doing content around our team. Spencer's a good example, and he couldn't join us because he had family things that prevented him moving to Minnesota. But he's someone that landed on our radar because he was doing content about our team.
Right. I mean, that's exactly like the type of passion, and like never just send a cold message like, I want to work in esports, but I don't know how. And usually I just tell those people, like, start doing things because esports is growing so much to the point where you can find your spot in that. So if you're, this is super obvious example, but if you're a photographer, or if you like maybe you really like Call of Duty, you like playing, but maybe you're not good enough to be a pro, like there's other things that you can do in this whole ecosystem. That apply.
And I think it's cool now that esports has continued to grow as much as it has. You guys were just at Player Up this past weekend at Mystic Lake, and that's something that, it's an esports event in Minnesota. Like, that's awesome. And when I was first coming up, when esports weren't really that big of a thing, it was all about, how can I get in at some, small level in sports videography? And then it was like reaching out to minor league baseball teams and doing videos for high school football team, and finding those ways. And I think more of those opportunities are coming up now, and it's just about, finding them and then, just trying to gain that experience and grow in the esports field as much as you can. And I think it's cool that we're getting to that point now with esports that it was with traditional sports as well.
And just to toss around ideas of where we could take some of these things. So there were a lot of people who have they did their own recap videos of launch weekend, right? Like, we should find a way to put those together into some sort of compilation content piece, right? To give, first of all, give love to the creators that took the time to do that. And then also, we should encourage that. So every brand should encourage people producing their own content around the brand. That's as important as anything we will do as a team directly. And I bring this up in part because over the weekend I kind of went down a rabbit hole of looking back at things that things with launch weekend that I just missed because we were all running around so frantically. And there were I saw some of them in the moment myself, and some things that people sent me, said, hey, check out this link, this is really cool. But there was a lot that I didn't even realize was there until I took the time this weekend to go back and look at some of these things that just people attending the event did, like great content that people put together.
I think it's really cool how, that just speaks to like the passion that you do find a lot in the esports scene, like because it's so young and it's so something people are so into that it makes it kind of easy to create that content as well. So Charlie, I want to talk to you about Saga, because that is your baby, essentially. It's all of RØKKR's baby, but it's like you're in charge of it. You're the person who's kind of putting this essentially show or series together. How do you think it's been so far? I know we're only like literally technically two, but like an epilogue plus an episode 1 or chapter 1 or whatever you want to think of it as. How's it been so far?
So, the first 2 episodes were really crazy because there was, the first episode was one, or the episode 0, whatever you want to call it, was this thing that was like, it was almost this like mythical episode that like you weren't sure that was ever going to come out, right? Like it's just like Saga's coming. And it's, it was attempting to tell the story of July when the team was announced all the way through like literally the team walking on stage for launch weekend. And like there's a lot that happened there. And it's like, how much of that is interesting to the fans? How much of it can we tell in a compelling way? And honestly, some of it is like, how much do we actually have footage of to be able to kind of tell that story with it? And that episode went through a lot of revisions. We had to go back to the drawing board a few times because it's like, how do we tell this really complicated, really long story in a short way that keeps our fans engaged? And I think it did end up coming out, it was really cool to be able to have it come out. And we had this kind of secret idea for us where we're like, we're going to drop 2 episodes in 1 week. Like this is going to be so cool. Like we're going to drop episode 0 and our fans are going to want more. And then we'll give them more like that same week.
Like technically, and too, watching a lot of the other docuseries that came out on some of these teams, like none of them covered like their brand. What does their brand mean? What, who is behind that brand? Like who, like not too many compelling interviews about like the start of their franchise.
And some of that is both the challenge and the opportunity, or I think spending some time on that is part of telling the story of the challenge and the opportunity of this organization of truly being the newest team in this league, right? I mean, we've obviously talked about it at length, but for listeners, 10 of the 12 teams are in OWL. The one that's not, besides us, is the London team that has history in the esports space. I mean, we are the youngest, newest team. Yeah. So that origin story for us, and did a great job telling it, that origin story is just, it's different and more, I think, foundational for our organization's story than it might be for most of the other teams in the league that have something else to lean back on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Do we want to take a sec to talk about my initial misspelling of origin when I first wanted to name it that? Because that was...
I thought it was a typo. And was it a genuinely, you didn't know how to spell it?
I messed it up. Oh. So we walked into the room and we were like, okay, like Saga, which is a cool name that I don't know if we've really dove into, like why we called it Saga.
I was looking up words one day and I saw Saga and I was like, oh, the saga continues. Yeah. But then I looked it up and that was actually used as a way to that's kind of what some of the old Norse mythology, stories, that word was frequently used. And so I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense. And we had, what were some of the other ones? Do we even want to say what they were?
Yeah, there was a few, I can't even remember a lot of them. I think I literally Googled Viking word for stories or something, and it was just a bunch of I think origin was actually one that we thought about calling this first season, but it was all over the place. But the first one you found just was the one that stuck with us, and we kept going with Saga.
Yeah, well, that wasn't the first, because we had been throwing back and forth internally ideas for a while, and I wasn't too hyped on any of them. Yeah. I mean, I thought there was it percolates some inspiration to keep looking up words and just keep looking up stuff that you think will fit. And, Saga just jumped off the page at me immediately. I think I texted you right away. I was like, dude, look, Saga. Yeah. And then I texted Brad. He's like, oh, that'd be cool. I think that makes sense.
And then that was the one that just stuck, and we kept coming back to it. And it's okay, we're going to.
Even before,
you got it, you know it.
Yeah, exactly. We'd never even had a meeting where we were let's think of the name. It was more just we started going from calling it the docuseries to Saga, and then we're like, well, that's just the name. We should call it that.
Yeah.
And then episode 1 just recently came out just before London, and then obviously we had a bye week at London, so you guys won't be seeing an episode this week before Atlanta, but we are going to be playing, in Atlanta now. Mm-hmm. This is our first away game as well, so it's not as easy as just, going downtown and filming a bunch of stuff and going crazy. You're going to be traveling with the team. You're going to be trying to get, whatever's going on, literally just following the team the whole weekend. Yeah. So that'll be kind of an interesting experience. But what are you trying to look for out of, when you're thinking about the weekend and how it's coming up, how do you make sure that you have a good story to tell at the end of it?
Yeah, I think learning from launch weekend, and that's I think a little bit of a challenge moving forward, because launch weekend, the story of launch weekend is we're putting this thing on. There's so much, not every fan, but most of the fans you look at there are wearing RØKKR gear. Everybody's going nuts. We put on this sweet event, and that's the story. But it's when we're traveling to Atlanta, we're playing in Atlanta, but what's the other story there? As people are saying, A plot, B plot. What are we going to be telling? And so we have an idea of these secondary stories that we can tell that kind of tell some of the backgrounds of our team and some of their upbringings, and some cool things like that. But, a lot of it is flying out with the team and, getting them at the airport and showing off just kind of who they are as people and how they travel together and what those team dinners look like in Atlanta and the practices beforehand and, being able to talk to them with how they're feeling in the moment and, being able to be present. And just kind of, it's easy to, well, it's not easy, but, the week after you sit them down in an interview and be like, oh, how did you feel at this time? How did you feel at this time? But I think a big key here is being able to get them in the moment and really get what they're truly feeling. Because I think that that's where the best content and my favorite content to see and to put together really comes out of, is those in the moments, like real raw emotion where they don't have a lot of time to think about it.
Yeah. And do you have a sense as you sit here right now of, obviously we hope we win. We hope we win the tournament. We obviously win 2-0 launch weekend. But do you have a sense of the different paths that story can take if we are successful in the tournament, if we win a few games and get knocked out, if it doesn't go the way we want? Do you go into it with a sense of those different potential paths, or do you more have to wait and see how it plays out before you start to pick a path?
I think it's a little bit of both. And part of that is choosing kind of the right, B plot to go along with it, and trying to make sure that those are kind of independent of how we do on the weekend. So you have that story to fall back on. As far as covering the tournament itself, a lot of that for me is as in the moment as it can, and you kind of got to read the room that it's, if we were to lose, or if it was a rough weekend and we get out of there and people are really, really upset about it on the team, that's a completely different story than if they come out of it and it's, okay, we know where we messed up and we're going to get better.
Yeah.
So a lot of that stuff is more or less in the moment, reading their emotions and kind of figuring out how they're feeling, and being able to tell that as honestly as possible.
Which is a balance. Every team every team in our league, every team in every sports league, every team in every traditional sports league has to find that balance, and everyone finds it in their own way. But yeah, you're right. You don't really know until it plays out how people are going to feel about it.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing, is that's one of the hardest things to do in sport. It's easy to tell stories and make compelling content when you're winning, right? That's what your fans get excited about. Mm-hmm. But I think that's one of the trickiest things is figuring out, if things do go south, how do we tell that story?
It's really like you're writing a book where you don't even know how the chapter is going to end, let alone how the story will end.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, this will be the story of our entire first season, and we don't know how it ends.
Yeah. Right? And that's a lot of, documentaries is, one of my favorite documentaries is, Last Chance U on Netflix, following junior college football. But I mean, even there, that was the example of a docuseries where they're this team's won 3 straight national championships. Let's follow them for a year. Mm-hmm. And then that first year they follow them, they don't win the national championship and they break this streak. But it's still compelling. You get to see that behind the scenes. So it's, and that kind of brings me back to that initial point of watching things, taking things from those, and being able to put our own twist on it and be able to tell all of our stories.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see kind of how the weekend goes. Obviously for the team, if you're watching Atlanta this weekend online, if you're supporting RØKKR, support us in the chat. You can support us in person. Actually, we're doing a watch party at Billy's on Grand in St. Paul. It's starting at, I believe, 8:45.
Correct.
8:45 a.m. on Saturday. It's early. Well, we're going to have some mimosas. Let's go. So we'll be doing a little watch party there. I'll be there. Pretty stoked. You two will obviously be in Atlanta.
Yep.
And for any fans, if you're in Atlanta, whether you live in that area or you're making the trip, if you're a RØKKR fan and you're in Atlanta, drop us a note on social media. We want to see you at the venue. And if you're in that crowd, make some noise, because the players, they really feed on it. They've been talking about it for the past month. So
yeah, they get really into it. Well, thank you so much for coming on board. I really appreciate it. Super stoked to see just everything that we end up doing this year and beyond, because I don't know. I know obviously competition and that's a major priority here, but I'm so proud of obviously also the other team that we built, which is the content machine. So.
Yep.
Super excited. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you're listening on iTunes, drop us a rating. Hit us with the 5 stars. Minnesota nice. That'd be nice of you to do. Leave a comment on YouTube. Leave a like, anything. We also are on YouTube. You could see Brett giggling right now if you're watching on YouTube. And then just thank you guys so much for listening. Much appreciated, and we'll catch you next time.